You are standing in the middle of a violent storm. The wind howls, the ground shakes, the sky splits open in rage. Now imagine in that chaos trying to sit still, eyes closed. Breathing slowly, meditating. Sounds absurd, doesn't it? That is what calmness feels like in the modern world. Not natural, not appropriate, not safe. Because somewhere along the way, we were taught that stillness is surrender, that peace is dangerous, that in a world so unstable, to be calm is to be irresponsible. We are raised inside a system that glorifies control, the illusion of it. We are conditioned to believe that if we just try hard enough, work long enough, plan thoroughly enough, we can command chaos. And yet, every day, life proves us wrong. A missed message, a global event, a diagnosis, a betrayal. The world reminds us that we are not in charge. This contradiction creates a quiet panic, an unrelenting tension between what we want to believe and what we can't help but feel. That, no matter how carefully we stack the cards, everything can still fall apart. So we adapt. We become hypervigilant, constantly on edge, scanning the world for threats, checking, refreshing, comparing. We don't call it fear, though. We call it being informed. We call it being productive. We call it being responsible. But behind the mask of responsibility, there's something else at work, a psychological trap known as learned helplessness, a term coined by psychologist Martin Seligman. It describes what happens when people are repeatedly exposed to stressors they cannot control. Eventually, they stop trying. They begin to internalize powerlessness. Even when escape is possible, they don't believe it is. Now imagine applying that to an entire society. A population trained through decades of media, institutions, and crisis after crisis to feel like calm is never an option. That something is always breaking. That something is always coming. That vigilance is safety. This is not an accident. This is the architecture of the panic economy, an invisible system in which your attention, your cortisol spikes, your emotional instability are all profitable. Media companies don't make money on your peace of mind. They survive by keeping you hooked on anxiety. Social platforms don't reward serenity. They reward outrage, comparison, distraction. The more emotionally reactive you are, the more predictable you become. And the more predictable you are, the more controllable you are. In the panic economy, your nervous system is not yours. It's outsourced, sold, monetized. We've been trained into a form of psychological slavery, constantly reacting, constantly refreshing, constantly afraid of missing something, losing something, becoming irrelevant. This constant reactivity becomes our baseline. It's not that we're choosing to be anxious. It's that calmness feels unsafe, inaction feels irresponsible, and silence feels like a threat to our relevance. But here's the paradox. We live in the most technologically advanced era in human history. We have more access to comfort, information, and convenience than any generation before us. And yet, anxiety and depression are at all-time highs. Why? Because progress without psychological sovereignty is just another trap. You can have all the tools, all the apps, all the productivity hacks, and still be a prisoner of your own mind. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus once said, "It's not events themselves that disturb us, but our judgments about them." But in the panic economy, you're not even given time to judge. You are shoved from one stimulus to another, one crisis to another. You don't respond. You react. Or more accurately, you are made to react. Nassim Taleb, in his writings on fragility and randomness, warned that modernity is increasingly obsessed with control and yet completely unprepared for true unpredictability. We create systems that seem stable, but they are fragile because they depend on constant micro-interventions, constant tweaks, constant vigilance. Like spinning plates on poles, stop for one moment, and the whole thing crashes. We've turned life into a performance of control where calmness is viewed as negligence. But the truth is, it's the other way around. It is the anxious mind, not the calm one, that is easily manipulated. It is the reactive mind, not the still one, that is vulnerable to fear, propaganda, and exploitation. This section is not just a critique, it's a confrontation. A confrontation with the invisible system you live in every day. A system that has hijacked your emotional instincts and sold them back to you as moral obligations. You've been told that calmness is a luxury, that stillness is unproductive, that peace is selfish. But what if those were the lies? What if true? Power begins the moment you no longer take the bait? The storm is real, but your reactivity to it? That's been conditioned. And what has been conditioned can be unlearned. The question is, who benefits from keeping you in the storm? And what might happen if, for the first time, you simply stood still in the wind? If the modern world teaches you to panic, the ancient world taught something entirely different. It taught the art of becoming unmoved not through denial, but through discipline. For thousands of years, long before algorithms and headlines ruled our attention, thinkers, mystics, and warriors across continents sought something radical, a calm mind in the middle of chaos. The Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius ruled over a vast, crumbling empire. War, betrayal, disease, his life was anything but peaceful. And yet, in his personal journal, never meant for publication, he wrote lines that would outlast centuries. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. This wasn't motivational fluff. It was a survival strategy. He was documenting how to stay sovereign in a world falling apart. Aurelius was a Stoic, part of a philosophical lineage that believed human suffering comes not from events, but from our judgments of those events. The Stoics trained themselves daily to detach from the noise and refocus on what they could control, their own thoughts, choices, and reactions. Seneca, another Stoic, wrote, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." He wasn't dismissing pain. He was challenging the habit of suffering twice, once through the event and once through the fear of the event. On the other side of the world, a very different tradition was arriving at the same truth. In ancient China, the Taoist sage Lao Tzu described the way of nature: soft, flowing, effortless. Be like water, he said. Water doesn't fight the stone. It wears it down over time. It doesn't resist chaos, it adapts. It doesn't cling to form, it finds its own path. In the Tao Te Ching, calmness is not portrayed as a passive state, but as a form of supreme alignment. Power comes not from rigidity, but from the ability to move without being moved. In India, the Bhagavad Gita told the story of Arjuna, a warrior paralyzed by the horror of war. His guide, Krishna, tells him that his turmoil comes not from the battle itself, but from his identification with fear, with ego, with outcome. True action, says Krishna, is action without attachment. To act from a calm center, detached from reward or failure, is to become invincible. Then there is Buddhism, a philosophy grounded entirely on the art of stillness. The Buddha taught that suffering arises from craving and aversion. We want things to be other than they are. We grasp at pleasure and resist pain, and in doing so, we exhaust ourselves. Mindfulness, in the original sense, is not about breathing techniques. It's about seeing clearly without reacting compulsively. It's the cultivation of non-reactivity as a way of being. All of these traditions, Stoic, Taoist, Hindu, Buddhist, came to the same conclusion. Calmness is not the absence of struggle. It is the mastery of response. It is not a passive retreat from life's storms. It is the decision to face them without letting them define your interior world. What makes these ancient teachings so relevant now is not just their beauty, but their defiance. In today's culture, calmness is viewed as an aesthetic, a vibe, a wellness product, something you earn after a long workday. But in the ancient world, calmness was a kind of inner warfare, a skill honed in adversity. Monks meditated not in luxury but on the edge of starvation. Stoics wrote philosophy while facing exile, poverty, and death. These were not calm people because they had calm lives. They had calm lives because they trained themselves to become calm people. There's a deeper reason calmness was so sacred. Because a calm mind cannot be ruled. It cannot be coerced by propaganda, seduced by power, or manipulated by fear. A person who has mastered their inner world becomes dangerous, not in a violent sense, but in a radical one. Dangerous to illusions. Dangerous to systems that require emotional chaos to survive. That's why rulers feared monks who refused to bow. Why emperors read Stoic texts in secret. Why the most powerful figures in history often studied philosophies of restraint. Because to control others, you must first keep them reactive. But a calm individual breaks the cycle. This is the forgotten truth behind spiritual stillness. It's not self-care. It's psychological resistance. A refusal to be pulled into the circus of emotional manipulation. And it's available to anyone willing to do the inner work. But it doesn't come easy. You don't wake up enlightened. Calmness is a discipline, a practice, a muscle. It begins by observing your reactions in the smallest moments. The impulse to interrupt, the flash of anger in traffic, the scroll through, endless outrage. In those moments, you are being trained by algorithms, by culture, by your own wiring to hand over your sovereignty. But what if instead you paused? Not to suppress the reaction, but to see it. To witness the wave rise and fall without becoming the wave. That is the essence of equanimity. A calmness not based on outcome, but on orientation. A refusal to be tossed around by things you cannot control. Not because they don't matter, but because you matter more. And when you live from this place, something begins to shift. The world doesn't become less chaotic, but it becomes less capable of shaking you. The noise is still loud, but your signal is stronger. You no longer react from habit. You respond from clarity. That is the storm-proof mind. Not impenetrable, not indifferent, but rooted. Grounded in a philosophy deeper than impulse, stronger than fear, and wiser than control. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it, and this you have the power to revoke at any moment." This was not just philosophy. It was a way to survive chaos without becoming it. In a world built to make you reactive, calmness becomes rebellion. And the first step to mastering the storm is realizing you were taught to fear stillness in the first place. Most people think they're anxious because of their thoughts. But that's only half the story. Because long before the mind spins its narratives, the body speaks first. A subtle tightening in the chest, a flutter in the stomach, a racing pulse. Without realizing it, your entire physiology shifts into high alert, even if there's no real danger in sight. This is the hidden battleground, the nervous system. And in the modern world, it's under siege. We are built biologically to survive immediate threats. Our ancestors needed this system, a flash of adrenaline to flee a predator, a surge of cortisol to fight for their lives. But that same mechanism, refined over millions of years, is now being hijacked on a daily basis by digital predators. You don't need a lion in the bushes anymore. A single notification can set off the same alarm. This is the cost of living in a world of manufactured urgency. Our nervous systems are being kept in a state of chronic activation, hyperstimulated, constantly scanning, always bracing for impact. And the worst part is, it feels normal. You get used to the tightness in your jaw, the sleepless nights, the restlessness that no amount of scrolling or stimulation can seem to quiet. This isn't just psychology. It's biology. And it's being weaponized. Dr. Stephen Porges, through his polyvagal theory, explains that our sense of safety is not intellectual. It's physiological. The body detects cues of safety or danger long before the conscious mind can interpret them. Your nervous system is constantly asking one silent question: am I safe? And if the answer is no, everything changes: posture, voice, digestion, even perception. In that state, you don't reflect. You react. Now imagine a world where the answer to that question, am I safe, is constantly manipulated. The news cycle tells you that everything is a crisis. Social media tells you that everyone is outperforming you. Advertising tells you that you're one purchase away from being enough. Together, these signals send a clear message to your body. You are not safe. You are not enough. You are not in control, and the body believes it. Over time, this leads to nervous system dysregulation, a condition where the balance between activation and relaxation is lost. You're stuck in fight, flight, or freeze, unable to return to calm even when the danger is gone. This is the invisible epidemic of our age, a population of people walking around with fried nervous systems, trying to think their way out of a biological imbalance. But calmness isn't a thought. It's a state. This is why telling someone to just relax rarely works, because you can't outthink a hijacked nervous system. You have to retrain it. And that starts with understanding how far the hijack goes. It begins in childhood. A home filled with unpredictability, emotionally or physically, wires the body for constant vigilance. That child grows up learning that peace is dangerous, that the moment things go quiet, something bad is coming. As adults, they recreate that chaos, not because they want to suffer, but because their body equates calm with exposure, with vulnerability. Add to that a culture of overstimulation, lights, screens, alerts, endless noise, and you've created the perfect storm, a nervous system that never fully powers down. This isn't a weakness. It's an adaptation. Your nervous system has been trying to protect you. But now, that protection has become a prison. The good news is, just as reactivity was learned, stillness can be learned too. It begins not with thinking differently, but with feeling differently. Practices like deep diaphragmatic breathing, cold exposure, slow intentional movement, these aren't spiritual rituals. They're biological reboots. They signal safety to the vagus nerve, the main communicator between body and brain. Over time, they recondition the nervous system to see calm not as a threat, but as a home. This isn't about escaping reality. It's about facing it from a regulated state. Because only when the nervous system feels safe can the mind think clearly. Only then can you distinguish real threats from false alarms. Only then can you choose your response instead of being ruled by reaction. And that is the turning point. Because in this age, calmness isn't just a preference, it's a resistance. To stay calm is to take back authority from a culture designed to keep you agitated. It's to say, I will not live in a constant emergency. I will not outsource my state of being to algorithms. I will not be a pawn in someone else's urgency. You are not broken. Your body is not your enemy. It's been trying to protect you from a world that no longer speaks in safety. But now it's time to speak back. Through stillness. Through breath. Through presence. not as an escape from the storm, but as the ground beneath it, because you cannot stop the noise out there. But you can reclaim the signal here. The calm mind is not harmless. It is not soft. It is not detached from the world's pain. It is, in fact, one of the most threatening forces in human history. Because when you are calm, you become difficult to manipulate. When you are calm, you do not panic. You do not conform. You do not obey for the sake of soothing your fear. You begin to see clearly. And systems built on chaos, division, and hysteria rely on one thing, that you don't see clearly. Calmness is subversion. It is emotional, non-cooperation. In a world that depends on your reactivity to sell you ideas, identities, and enemies, inner stillness is not apathy. It is revolt. Throughout history, moments of true calm have shaken power more than armies ever could. Think of Gandhi, sitting in silence as the empire trembled. Think of Martin Luther King Jr. marching in dignified stillness while the forces of hatred screamed in his face. Think of Buddhist monks who burned in protest without a word, without a flinch, and in doing so, exposed the madness of violence. Itself. In each case, calmness was not passivity. It was clarity. And clarity makes propaganda fall apart, because manipulation needs chaos to thrive. It needs you to feel that if you don't act now, you'll be left behind. It needs you to believe. That urgency equals truth. That fear equals loyalty. That anger equals identity. But when you are calm, none of that sticks. You become immune to the cycle of reaction. You stop being a puppet in the theater of outrage. And that, to those in power, is terrifying. Let's talk about emotional contagion. The psychological phenomenon in which emotions spread through groups like viruses. When you see someone panic, your mirror neurons light up. You begin to panic too. When you see people laugh, you begin to smile. We're wired this way because our ancestors relied on group behavior to survive. But in the modern world, that instinct is used against us. News headlines are designed to provoke emotional contagion. Breaking, crisis, threat. These are not just words. They are emotional triggers. The goal is not to inform you, but to recruit you. 2. Pull you into a state of collective feeling so you stop thinking. So you surrender your agency. So you become part of the herd. And once you're in that emotional herd, you're no longer responding to truth. You're responding to tone, to fear, to energy. And it becomes very easy to guide you, not with logic, but with emotional signals. Is the foundation of propaganda. Not the delivery of lies, but the engineering of feeling. Make people feel afraid, and you don't have to convince them. Make people feel enraged, and they'll beg for certainty. Make people feel divided, and they'll never look at the hand pulling the strings. But calmness breaks that loop. A calm person is not contagious in the same way. They do not amplify hysteria. They do not mimic rage. They don't spread the virus. They contain it, and so they become dangerous. They become difficult to categorize. Not left, not right. Not radical, not compliant, just grounded, present, aware. And when you can't be categorized, you can't be controlled. This is why stillness has always been feared by those who benefit from confusion. Because when people stop reacting, they start asking questions, real questions. Questions that systems don't want to answer. Like, why is fear the primary language of our leaders? Why are we being told who to hate every week? Why are the loudest voices always the most extreme? Why does peace feel suspicious, while conflict feels familiar? A calm mind is not indifferent. To these questions, it is precisely the mind capable of asking them, because when you're not drowning in noise, you can hear the quiet manipulations. When you're not caught in urgency, you can recognize the patterns. When you're not emotionally hijacked, you can choose your own path. And that choice, that sovereignty of thought and feeling, is the foundation of true power. There is a reason authoritarian regimes suppress meditation, philosophical inquiry, and independent media. Because anything that centers the individual is a threat to the collective trance. Anything that builds inner strength destabilizes outer control. And calmness, real calmness, not detachment or denial, is the ultimate threat to artificial authority. It's important to remember, calmness is not the same as silence. It does not mean disengagement. It means action from clarity, not compulsion. Resistance without hatred. Movement without panic. Speaking truth without trembling. This is the kind of calm that cannot be faked. It's not a tone of voice or a facial expression. It is a state of nervous system integrity. A body that has trained itself not to jump. A mind that has disciplined itself not to flinch. A soul that has remembered how to breathe even when the world holds its breath. That is revolutionary, not because it overthrows anything, but because it no longer obeys panic. To understand how rare this is, look around. Look at how quickly people turn against each other over ideas they barely understand. Look at how easily we surrender to fear if it's wrapped in the right colors. Look at how often the loudest opinions are just the fastest reactions. We live in a world where reactivity has become an identity. To pause, to refuse, is to disappear from the performance. And to those still in the performance, that disappearance feels threatening. But here's the truth. Nothing is more contagious than genuine peace. When someone walks into a room calm, grounded, and present, everything shifts. People feel it. They can't explain it, but it affects them. And in that moment, they realize something. They could choose it. 2. Calmness spreads. Slowly. Quietly. But deeply. And that's what makes it revolutionary. Because if enough people stop reacting, the system cracks. If enough people breathe instead of rage, the fire dies down. If enough people stay grounded, new questions emerge. Better questions. Questions that lead to truth instead of control. You don't have to shout. You don't have to convert. You don't have to argue. You just have to not participate in the panic. And in doing so, you become a signal in the storm. A reminder that stillness is not surrender. It is strategy. That clarity is not weakness. It is resistance. That calmness is not silence. It is power. It is easy to romanticize calmness, to speak of inner stillness as a noble rebellion against chaos. But without practice, these words remain poetry. The truth is, calm is not a personality trait. It is a discipline, a skill that must be cultivated, a state that must be earned through deliberate, often uncomfortable practice. In a world engineered to trigger you, to addict you, divide you, provoke you, calmness is not natural. But it can become second nature if trained with precision. So what does that training look like? It begins with attention. The world has stolen your attention and sold it back to you in fragments, in push notifications, in autoplay videos, in clickbait headlines, in infinite scrolls. Your mind, once whole, has become shattered into pieces of urgency. To reclaim your calm, you must reclaim your attention. That means learning how to sit with boredom, to feel the itch to check your phone and not check it, to read slowly, to stare at the sky, to walk without headphones. These aren't spiritual luxuries. They are neurological resets. Each moment of undivided presence reclaims territory that modern life has colonized. And as your attention heals, so does your nervous system. The next practice is bodily regulation. Calmness is not just a mental choice, it is a biological condition. You cannot think your way into calm if your body is screaming, and your body is constantly learning from your environment. If you feed it caffeine, blue light, violent media, and erratic schedules, it learns panic. But if you feed it breath work, cold showers, morning sunlight, deep sleep, still movement like yoga or Tai Chi, it learns peace. Regulating your body is not about achieving some Zen ideal. It's about giving your nervous system enough safety to exit survival mode. Because you cannot feel safe in the world if your body is a battlefield. Then comes cognitive clarity. Calmness is not the absence of thoughts. It is the presence of accurate ones. The mind will always generate interpretations. But without training, those interpretations are paranoid, emotional, reactive. You must learn to separate stimulus from story. Meditation is a powerful tool here, not because it stops your thoughts, but because it shows you what they are made of. You start to see, this is not truth. This is a memory. This is not danger. This is conditioning. This is not urgency. This is ego. Once you begin to watch your mind without becoming it, the spell breaks. You no longer react to every thought as a command. You respond to reality as it is, not as fear paints it. Another crucial practice is emotional alchemy. Calm people do not suppress their feelings, they process them. Anger, fear, grief, jealousy. These are not signs of weakness. They are messengers, but if ignored, they become infections. Emotional stillness comes not from avoidance, but from integration. That means letting the emotion speak, but not letting it drive. Naming it, feeling it, breathing through it, then asking, what does this teach me? Calmness is not neutrality. It is emotional maturity. It is knowing how to feel fully without being hijacked. Equally important is information hygiene. Most people consume psychological garbage all day and wonder why they feel anxious. You cannot create inner peace while drinking from poisoned wells. Every video, post, article, and meme you consume leaves an imprint on your mind. If you constantly expose yourself to outrage, doom, gossip, or spectacle, your brain wires itself for reaction. Guard your inputs like you would your diet. Curate your feed. Turn off notifications. Read books instead of headlines. Choose depth over dopamine. Calmness is the natural result of clean information. Next comes environmental architecture. Your surroundings speak to your subconscious constantly. Clutter screams chaos. Noise signals threat. Artificial lighting confuses your rhythms. If your environment is disordered, your mind will be too. You don't need a monastery, but you do need a space that reflects the state you want to inhabit. Clear your room, add plants, light candles, use warm colors. Design your environment to become a partner in your peace. Because every time you walk into your space, it should remind your nervous system, you are safe here. Now we arrive at relational boundaries. You cannot remain calm in the presence of emotional vampires. Your peace is fragile, especially in the early stages. You must protect it. That means learning to say no, to step away from conversations that drain you, to disengage from people who bait you into performance, panic, or drama. It's not cruel, it's intelligent. You cannot heal while being constantly re-injured. Boundaries are not walls, they are filters. They allow in nourishment and block out poison. Every boundary you set is a declaration. My peace matters more than your approval. One of the most powerful but least discussed practices is spiritual anchoring. This doesn't have to be religious. It simply means finding something bigger than your fear. It might be nature, music, prayer, silence, philosophy, the Tao, the stars. What matters is that you touch something eternal, regularly. Because when the world screams panic, your calm must come from a deeper source. When the system says react, your soul must answer no. You can't fake that. It has to come from something ancient inside you. something unshaken. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, is the practice of pausing. It sounds simple. It is not. The modern world is allergic to the pause. But that space between trigger and response is where freedom lives. When you pause even for one breath, you break the spell of compulsion. You remember, I do not have to react, I can choose. That pause is the birthplace of sovereignty. And the more often you practice it, the more often you remember who you are beneath the programming. None of these practices are glamorous. You won't get applause for sitting in silence. You won't go viral for drinking chamomile tea instead of joining the outrage. But slowly, these invisible disciplines begin to shape you. You stop being hijacked. You stop leaking energy. You begin to feel your own center returning, not as an idea, but as a sensation, as a home. And over time, that calmness stops being effort. It becomes your baseline, your atmosphere. You begin to radiate it. People feel it when you walk in. They don't know why, but they trust you. Not because you're loud, not because you're dominant, but because you are still. And in a world of chaos, stillness is magnetic. That is the final truth of this chapter. Calmness is not passive. It is attractive. Not in the social sense, in the gravitational sense. The calm person pulls others in, not with force, but with gravity. And in that pull, something miraculous happens. Other people remember their own stillness. So if you want to change the world, don't start with slogans. Don't start with fury. Start by becoming the calmest person in the room. That's where all real revolution begins. We often imagine magnetism as charisma, as the ability to impress others through energy, charm, or confidence. But there is a deeper kind of magnetism, one that doesn't entertain or perform, but draws people in through something far more rare: presence, stillness, the kind of energy that says nothing, yet speaks everything. It is the paradox of attraction. Those who seek approval rarely receive it, while those who carry calm within them are quietly, inexplicably, irresistible. Why? Because in a world of noise, stillness feels like truth. Most people are overwhelmed, overstimulated, and undercentered. They're trapped in their heads, tangled in self-conscious loops, constantly scanning for how they're perceived. So when they encounter someone who is fully here, who is not rushed, not reactive, not seeking validation, it feels like oxygen. It reminds them of something they lost. It triggers not desire, but memory. Oh, I used to feel this way too. That's the beginning of the pull. Stillness is not an act. It's a transmission. People sense your nervous system before they hear your words. If you are calm, they feel safe. If you are rooted, they feel seen. If you are unshaken, they begin to remember their own center. This is not magic. It's biology. Your nervous system regulates the space around you. When you're in sympathetic overdrive, anxious, needy, performative, people mirror that state. But when you're in parasympathetic calm, they begin to synchronize. And suddenly, without effort, you become a calming force in the room. That force is power, not dominance, not control. Something subtler, something more ancient. Consider the most magnetic people you've ever met. They don't speak loudly. They don't need to prove themselves. They rarely interrupt. They look at you and you feel disarmed. Not because of what they say, but because of what they don't need from you. That is the core of this power, the absence of need. Most of us leak hunger for attention, approval, admiration, and that hunger repels. But when you no longer need to be impressive, you become impactful. When you no longer chase attention, you command it. This stillness also makes you enigmatic. In a world of oversharing and constant self-display, Calm people are mysterious. They don't spill every thought. They don't rush to fill silence. They listen. They leave space. And that space becomes magnetic, because human beings are deeply curious, and nothing draws our attention more than what we can't immediately define. When someone holds silence with confidence, we lean in. We want to know what they're thinking. We want to feel what they're feeling. They're not playing a game, but they draw attention because they are not trying to. This presence is especially magnetic in relationships, in romance, in friendship, in leadership, because people aren't looking for perfection. They're looking for grounding. Someone who won't be swayed by every emotional tide. Someone who doesn't spiral when things go wrong. Someone who can hold space, not just for themselves, but for others. Stillness gives people permission to exhale. And when someone can breathe around you, they trust you. That trust isn't built through words. It's built through emotional regulation. This is why stillness is not just attractive, it is rare. Most people confuse intensity with depth. But intensity burns hot and fades fast. Stillness, on the other hand, creates depth without urgency. It invites curiosity without pressure. It says, I don't need to be seen, but if you choose to see me, I'm here. That quiet power lingers long after you leave the room. It doesn't dazzle, it resonates. And here's the key. You don't need to fake it. You can't. People are exquisitely attuned to authenticity. Faux calm is just disguised control. Real stillness isn't stoicism or shutdown, it's an internal trust. A trust that whatever arises can be met, that you don't need to grasp, that you can let the moment unfold without domination. When you live from that place, you become a mirror. Others see themselves in you, not the masks they wear, but their true self. That is magnetic, because most people are starving to remember who they are beneath performance. This kind of presence also disrupts social power dynamics. In status-driven environments, people often perform louder voices, faster speech, anxious laughter. But when you stay rooted, when you speak slowly, when you leave space between words, you change the tempo. You become the rhythm that others unconsciously adjust to. And the one who sets the rhythm holds the frame, not through dominance, but through groundedness. That groundedness becomes influence. Even in conflict, stillness is powerful. Most arguments escalate because people mirror each other's agitation. But when you remain calm, you de-escalate the emotional voltage. You don't react. You respond. You don't get pulled into their storm. You invite them into your calm. That doesn't mean being passive. It means being anchored, unshaken. From that place, you speak with clarity, not defensiveness. And people feel the difference. It's not about winning. It's about staying aligned with your integrity. And nothing commands respect more than someone who remains calm under pressure. Stillness is also magnetic because it allows depth to emerge. Most people never truly feel seen. They're caught in surface conversations, performance scripts, role play. But when they sit with someone who is truly present, something opens. They feel noticed not as a role, but as a being. And in that presence, they reveal more. They go deeper. Because stillness makes space. And in that space, real intimacy grows. So when we speak of being magnetic, we are not talking about gimmicks or techniques. We are talking about energy, about coherence, about creating a field around you that invites safety, clarity, and presence. That field is not built overnight. It is the fruit of inner discipline, of psychological stillness. The irony, of course, is that the more you try to be magnetic, the less you are. Magnetism is not a performance. It is a consequence, a byproduct of self-possession. The calm person draws attention not because they chase it, but because they don't, And in a world addicted to spectacle, the one who doesn't perform becomes sacred. People don't always understand it, but they feel it, and they want more of it. So if you want to be magnetic, don't fake charm. Don't rehearse lines. Don't posture or pose. Instead, do the quiet, invisible work, the stillness, the discipline, the practices of presence. Build your inner space. Regulate your nervous system. Listen deeply. Breathe slower. Speak from alignment. Let go of the need to impress. And then, just be. Your calm will do the rest.